Good afternoon to you all, and it is my great honor and a privilege to be speaking on this wonderful event that has organized by Dzogchen Ponlop Rinpoche, His Eminence Dzogchen Ponlop Rinpoche, and His Eminence Thea Dupu Rinpoche, and all of you to have this great place of Dharma Center with the Dharmakaya stupa of the Gyalwa Karmapa Rikpi, the 16th Gyalwa Karmapa, and also to really for those, all of us who have had the great fortune to have been met him, to go and visit, and as well as also to pay our respects, and also to continue our sort of connection and supplicate for all of the blessings that we could use to personally kind of have the growth that we aspire to have, as well as also to make prayers for the world, and for much of the world needs all kinds of blessings, as we now are much more, ever so than before, clear how much this world really is in a need of great help of an enlightened beings, and particularly like particularly enlightened being like His Holiness Gyalwa Karmapa, and also for the future generations, for a long time to come. The place is going to be there, the stupa is going to be there, the center is going to be there for people to make a connection with the Buddha Dharma in general, and particularly Karma Kagyu, and that of the particularly with the His Holiness 16th Gyalwa Karmapa, whom really had a very deep, in my view, connection to the West, and also deep connection to the Western people. With him and with his sort of like a guidance, and with his encouragement, much of what we have here in the West, the Dharma centers and the Dharma teachers, and all of the Dharma activities have flourished. As I once heard from somebody, that he really encouraged Kyabje Dilgo Rinpoche to come to West and teach and give as much of an teachings and refuge vows and all sorts of general and sacred teachings making available for the West and the Western audiences, so that they could all receive the benefit that many generations, what the Tibetans had the great fortune to receive. So in that way, I think he had a very, among all the enlightened ones, a deep kind of compassion and care for the West and the Western generations to come to make a connection, and also to really have the opportunities to study the Dharma and to practice the Dharma and then receive the benefits of that. So that will be assured. So it is really a great endeavor, and I really, from bottom of my heart, want to, express my appreciation for Tolchen Pelab Rinpoche and Drupal Rinpoche and all of the Nalanda West and all who are involved in establishing this center for your great endeavor. So it is, as I said, also a great honor for me to be speaking, though I'm not really any significant person to speak on such occasion, as many of the other speakers are in the list. However, having had the great fortune to meet him few kind of times, and what impact it has personally had on me, and what sort of it has done personally to make me inspired, and also really to kind of begun my own journey in the kind of service of the Dharma and the benefit of the beings through the activities of the Dharma. I thought it would be kind of maybe perhaps not assuming too much to kind of share some of my own kind of experience, and also to tell some of the stories that I kind of have in my mind, that are told to me, and that are also my own observations when I met the 16th Gyalwa Karmapa. So my background is quite humble, and I was born in India, as mentioned, from a set of a family, or set of parents, and in the family of Choju Lingpa tradition, and my father was Choju Lingpa the third, from the Neten Gun monastery, Neten Choling. Choju Lingpa had two monasteries, and therefore two reincarnations came after he passed away. And my father was our third Neten Choling, and I am the youngest son of him, and my mother was, I don't know about renowned, but really serious practitioner, and she did 13 years of solitude retreat in the back side of her mother's or her family's home. And then she married my father, and then she, throughout her life, continued her practice in 4 sessions. So she was a great influence on me. So, as you know, in 1959, when the big change took place in Tibet, and my parents fled, and they actually arrived safely to Sikkim before, I think, the big event took place in Lhasa, in which, in the end of the big uprising, His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama left, and then it was kind of all over. And my parents, I think, one of the reasons left Tibet was because many great teachers like Gyalwa Karmapa, who is my father's root teacher, also left for India, though I think he was going for pilgrimage and then see what happens. And he really wanted very much to return back to Tibet. But then when it became clear that, His Holiness Dalai Lama left and the uprising was over and there was no way to kind of regain the independence. So then he also was quite resolved to stay in Sikkim, and then soon after he passed away. So my parents left because of him, and also maybe perhaps they had an inclination that the times are not going to be so that great. So they wanted to also seek safety, and also wanted to kind of follow other teachers like His Holiness 16 Karmapa also left, and many other teachers like my own root teacher Kyabje Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche also left, and so they all knew, and they all kind of knew one reasons. This is one of the reasons I think it is really remarkable that His Holiness the 16th Gyalwa Karmapa, even long before, even as I heard when he was in teens, predicted that the times are not going to be very easy, and that he would eventually leave for India. So to have that kind of on the far side, and to be able to predict something like that long before, when everything was actually not seemingly any kind of big threat or danger to the welfare and the well-being of the Tibetan people and the situations and the lifestyles that they enjoyed. So a lot of people, even long before, had that kind of some kind of because people have so much faith and trust in His Holiness Gyalwa Karmapa and his ability to kind of like with the Sakme Muishi clairvoyance to be able to kind of see the future, made that prediction. So my parents left, and then they came to Sikkim, and then they came to India, and I was born in India, in Manali, and nearby a river, and all among many refugee tents. And then soon after, my father, under the kind of organization of His Holiness 16th Gyalwa Karmapa, there were 13 groups who sort of founded some independent kind of a resource and the means to establish a settlement, Tibetan refuge settlement. And my father was one of those leader or the teacher who under the guidance of His Holiness 16th Gyalwa Karmapa, established the Bir, the Tibetan refugee community. And so I mainly grew up there. I think I was maybe perhaps 10 months when we first came to Bir, and then it took a few years to establish the settlement, and then we were settled. And so it was kind of a very unsettling time in the Tibetan communities all throughout all over India, because we just have lost Tibet and many great masters, and so many Tibetan refugees have came to be exiled, and then they don't speak any Hindi language or English language, and they have no any kind of skills that can be put into use, and also when they left, some maybe have some possessions that they were able to bring with them, but many left in a sort of like a trauma and in a sort of uprise, so left with just only maybe not even a bowl to eat. In the case of like His Holiness Pendu Rinpoche and Zono Rinpoche and many others, Tumbo Rinpoche as well. So, and then the climate is very, very different. Tibet is roof of the world, and there's always much of the year snow and a lot of cool wind, cool air. And India, as we all know how hot it is and how hot it gets. And so the climate was very, very big adjustment for Tibetan people. And then on top of that, the diet, Tibetans mainly ate tsampa. And in order to grow tsampa, you need to have a field, and there's no field that you grow your own barley. And Indians don't sell barley or grow barley at all then. And what you can get is rice and dal, and Tibetan people are not that they don't like rice, but eating rice every day was not their diet at all. And then with the dal, I think the dal and rice is totally in their sight, I think, was very kind of unappealing to Tibetan. And but nonetheless they had to eat, and so a lot of Tibetans really died everywhere. And then they have to have some means to survive. So what they can actually do and what they can actually offer to have some kind of livelihood was to work on the roads. India also just recently then got independent, so India was also quite poor as Tibetans, and but nonetheless there was some road being built, especially in the kind of Himachal and in the border areas. So a lot of Tibetans were working on the road and just manual labor, working on the road, blowing dynamites and just working on the road and in small camps. And so to then have a land, and then to have some kind of a community of one's own, and to have some field to grow your own crops, and to have some kind of like a future, a foreseeable future, to have some preservation of culture and religion and lifestyle, and it was a great gift under the kind of guidance of His Holiness 16th Gyalwa Karmapa, my father and the leaders who were able to kind of organize. However, it was still very poor. There were a lot of dysentery problems, and there were a lot of other health issues, and we didn't have any kind of a clinic. And there was later one clinic came, but it was very inefficient. So in there I grew up, and so my first kind of a memory of 16 Gyalwa Karmapa is he came very kindly, very, very kindly and compassionately to kind of see how people are doing in Bir, in the refugee camp. That is connected to him. That is under supervision of my father. He came to visit. And the feeling that I remember was that a Buddha was coming, a real enlightened Buddha was coming to visit. Just as in general, like in the household, in our household and every other household that I knew had a feeling that a real enlightened Buddha was coming to visit. And, so there was a tremendous, immense amount of a joy in the community in that kind of a very difficult, anxious, unsettling time. Some kind of a sense of a deep hope and some kind of a deep feeling of that we are cared for and that we are kind of truly, looked after by him coming to visit. And we, in my family, my mother, who's from Nangchen, kingdom, we never say, Karmapa in a kind of like a casual way. We always say Sangye Karmapa with sort of deep devotion and deep kind of a respect. My mother always kind of had that kind of a sentiment. So that was instilled in all of us. And so there was a great exciting moment. And then he came, and then he saw the situation where we were living, and he was very, very encouraged. He said that, my father found this land as a sort of a ter, in the previous Chojulingbas, they found treasures, other kinds of treasures, but in his life he found this land as a ter. And there's also kind of a story that when my father was quite young, maybe in his teens, one man with a long arm, very, very long arm, came to him and said, in the future I have a gift to present you. And then he said, what gift? A piece of land. So that was supposedly be the Bir, and that man was one of the protectors named Shempalari, and is one of the Vajraklaya's retinues in the protectors. So Karmapa really thought that there was some thing to say about Bir being kind of discovered by my father as a there. And he was very, very happy how, though of course everybody was very poor, everybody was struggling, but how we had our piece of our own piece of land and also community and a chance to preserve some dignity of our own and culture of our own and have some kind of a prosperity of our own to establish monasteries. There were few monasteries already, not in any kind of formal shape as what we have now, but in the tents, few monks who left with my father. They were trying to kind of get together and also continue the tradition of the monastery under a tent. And so he was very, very happy. And then one of the events in that time was to have the ordinance of His Holiness Gyalwa Karmapa with his enlightened head ceremony to be presented. So we really believed, and I still do believe continuously. So that seeing His Holiness Karmapa with his hat on in that enlightened head ceremony being observed, that you would be assured not to go down to the lower realms, and that you would have a higher birth. And so there was a big kind of like a, really joy and sadness because of, people have gone through a lot of trauma and a lot of had suffered a lot. But a lot of, in the end, joy to have His Holiness Karmapa come to be and also, grace us with his, enlightened head ceremony. There was tremendous joy, and many didn't have much, but those who have some means, they really wanted to kind of, be in the front line and sponsor. And so there were quite a number of sponsors who were able to kind of make the request. And then His Holiness, with a huge public, I don't know, maybe a couple of thousands, in the outside of the small school that we had, gave us the kind of chance to observe him in the enlightened activity of the black hat ceremony. And there then I was maybe perhaps 3 or 4 or something like that. 3 or 4 or something like that. I really felt like not only that the enlightened Buddha Karmapa was coming to visit, that if there is an enlightened Buddha, how it could be any more significant, more glorious, more sort of really wondrous to touch us all, to open our hearts. So many people are just kind of like breaking down right and left and everywhere. And so much of devotion, and something kind of happened that the whole sort of environment kind of became a light and a vibrant kind of energy. Even though I was young, as 3 or 4, I still recall this very much with a sort of, immediately, the place didn't seem like a same place. And so that was my first memory of His Holiness. And then he was there for some days, and then he left. And then, of course, our lives became more normal and more in the kind of the same way as would normally we live. Then the second time, then I met him was this is, my father passed away very young age in a motor vehicle accident coming back from Delhi. And so in that same year, His Holiness Kyabje Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, my root teacher, was also coming to Tashijong and to give Damgaju, one of the 5 treasures of Jamgo Kongtrul Lodru Thaye's work. So it kind of happened that my father died right before he came to do the empowerments. So then it almost like without an arrangement that my father passed away, and then Kyabje Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche arrived. So then we, the tremendous, again, kindness and compassion, he kind of oversaw the all of this necessities to sort of, how do you say, do the pujas and cremate and all of that. So that's the time then. Also, I think Khyentse Rinpoche had some kind of a thought that I was too cool, or maybe had some kind of an maybe I would think signs of some ways that I could be perhaps a benefit to Dharma and others. And so then after that, then Rinpoche gave Kyabje Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche gave Damgaju empowerment, and I was there receiving it with immense devotion and deep kind of a feeling of happiness, though my father just passed away. But there was a sense of deep also feeling of meeting my root teacher and also receiving all these empowerments kind of was a big consolation and a deep sort of feeling of peace. So then after some time, I think Khyentse Rinpoche sent a letter saying that he has had a chance to talk to His Holiness 16 Gyalwa Karmapa, and then confirmed that I'm a reincarnation of Dzigar Kongtrul Lodru Rapsal. Dzigar Kongtrul Lodru Rapsal, I think it's someone not so many people know, and I think maybe perhaps therefore, if I, without kind of being presumptuous, to say a little bit about who he was. He was, after Jamgo Kongtrul, the great, so to speak, Jamgo Kongtrul Lodru Thaye passed away. It was kind of during their lifetimes known that Jain Chinsawan was said that there will be a couple of reincarnations of his, and then there will be a couple of reincarnations of Jamgo Kongtrul Lodru Thaye to do the benefit of beings and also to serve the Dharma. Then when Jamgo Kongtrul Lodru Thaye passed away, and Jamgo Kongtrul Lodru Thaye, though of course initially entered into Shechen Monastery, the Nyingma Monastery, then later he went into Parpong, and then he went and grew up in the Parpong Monastery as a recognized Tuku of Kongtrul, and then of course, he became very well renowned teacher of the Rinme tradition. So when he passed away, I think the Pabong Sidhu, the previous one, I think was making a journey up to Lhasa or something like that. And then on the way, he stopped at the Dzigar monastery, which is another monastery, Dilgo Khyentse monastery. And in the Dzigar monastery, there's the Dzigar Kongtrul, who's the main teacher of that monastery. And his younger brother is now what we know as Dzigar Kongtrul or Lodru Rapsal. So then the previous Situ Rinpoche has recognized him as a Kongtrul Tugu. And then as a tradition, then, the Tugus have to go to the monastery and be trained. So then Situ Rinpoche took him back to Papong monastery. And then again in that same journey or another journey, then Karmapa Center also said that, Dzigar Kongtrul is a Kongtrul reincarnation, but his also own son is a Kongtrul Tugu. And as it's a tradition that he should also be in the Papong and then be brought up there in the Papong monastery. So Karmapa's son, Kase Kongtrul and Dzigar Kongtrul both grew up in Papong monastery. And as we know, Papong monastery is a Karmapa Center monastery, strictly Karmapa Center monastery. And so Dzigar Kongtrul and Kase Kongtrul both grew up in Karmapa Center monastery in the Papong or Papong monastery. And so then, of course, the Kase Kongtrul, being Kase Kongtrul, Karmapa's son, is the main one, and then Dzigar Kongtrul was sometimes is known as Kongtrul Lodru Rapsal, sometimes is known as Dzigar Kongtrul because he's a younger brother of the Dzigar Kongtrul. They call it Guruma because he was a little bit bent, I heard. So then later in as they both are grown up, then Dzigar Kongtrul went up to Central Tibet, and then coming down from the Central Tibet, as there is some prediction that he should build a monastery nearby my father's monastery, Neten. So then he built a monastery in the Tsokra monastery, that which is in the Rango Tsoka. It's nearby a lake. So that's my monastery, or my predecessor's monastery. And it was completely and fully Karmapa Center monastery, and it is still Karmapa Center monastery under the kind of auspices of the Papong monastery and Papong kind of traditions. So, so I guess in order for me to be confirmed as some Tuku of Karmapa Center and also the kind of a Kongtrul Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, I think the Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche had to consult with Gyalwa Karmapa, and Gyalwa Karmapa had to give a consent. So he must have talked to him and then give a consent and also decide. So that's the kind of a brief history before me. And then when I was around, so I got the letter, and then I was enthroned in my father's monastery, as my father's monastery needed some help. My father has passed away, and my elder brother was only one who was in charge. So Khyentse Rinpoche thought I could actually be an help to him in the monastery to kind of look after and do some service of Dharma and benefit of others. So I was enthroned there, and then, I don't know, maybe when I was around 13 or 14 or something like that, then we had this, great news that my father was reincarnated, and reincarnated in Bhutan, and in Bhutan he was reincarnated, and then His Holiness Karmapa has recognized him, and then Kyabje Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche was going to bring him and to Bodh Gaya. So the whole family went to Bodh Gaya, and we were in Bodh Gaya waiting for Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche to arrive, and then bring my father's reincarnation, who was recognized by 16th Gyalwa Karmapa, who was born in Bhutan. So it was again a very tumultuous kind of emotions, and sad and joy, both events. And then Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche came and brought my father's reincarnation, the fourth Neten Choling, whom now we have in Bir. And one thing about the reincarnation, though I think when you're a skeptic, you're always going to be a skeptic, but if one is open to kind of a truthful story that is with no reasons to tell anything else, when Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche brought my father's reincarnation, who was recognized by His Holiness Gyalwa Karmapa, I was very excited just to have a chance to reunite with my own root teacher. It's been some years since I haven't seen him. So I kind of forgot about my father's reincarnation. He was very young. He was 2.5 or something like that. So after everything was being settled in Khyentse Rinpoche's residence, then I went up. We all had small tents in the Burmese compound on the roof. And my mother and my sister both were crying. And I said, "Why are you crying?" And they said, "Oh, this young Tuko of our fathers recognizes all of us." And I thought, I think that's make believe a little bit. He's 2.5 years old. How could he recognize all of us? So anyway, I haven't really met him personally that time. So then I went to his tent, and he was sitting on a bed with a carpet. And so he was 2.5 years. He was quite small, and his mother was sitting next to him. He said something to his mother in Bhutanese. In their dialogue, he didn't speak Tibetan then. And I said, what did he say? And he said, "Oh, he's one of my sons." And I said, "Oh, which one? Because we are 4. So I wanted to kind of put him in test a little bit of my own, which one? And then she said something, "Oh, the youngest one." I said, "Oh, that's kind of interesting. He knows that I'm his son and the youngest one." So that was a little bit of a kind of a surprise. So then I was sitting there and then talking a little bit, and then all of a sudden he looked at the carpet, carpet which belonged to my father, my family, and he said something, and I said, "What did he say?" He said, "Oh, this belongs to me. I brought it from Tibet." And then I was thinking, like, okay, that's another kind of a surprise. And then he was saying something, and then he said, they changed the lining behind, And it's true, like the lining behind was changed. And there's a new lining that is a white. So I really wanted to kind of ask, what was the color of the lining before? I said, what is the color of the lining before this? And then she said something, and he said, blue. I was really surprised, because it used to be blue, and it was worn out. So, he knew that detail. So I was quite taken back. And so anyway, that was the case. And then from there, I went to Nepal with His Holiness Kyabje Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, accompanying him. And then there we received, Choling Dersa, Choling circle of empowerments and teachings. And there I first met, Nyemba Rinpoche, Tona Japru Rinpoche, and many others whom I have not met. Of course, Nonsa Khyentse Rinpoche was there, Shi Chenamdel was there, as well as many other tukus. So then, end of that empowerment, then it was arranged that that we will all go to Darjeeling, and then from Darjeeling we'll go to Sikkim, and then in Sikkim, my father's reincarnation, who's, by then I think maybe 3, was going to be enthroned in the Rumtik monastery. So then, just as planned, we went to Darjeeling, and then from Darjeeling we went to Sikkim. And I was really very excited to go to Sikkim, and once again, as a little bit of a young adult, to encounter His Holiness 16 Gyalwa Karmapa and see him and get some blessings from him. So I was very, very kind of excited and a little bit nervous as well. So we got to Sikkim, and we went to Rumtek, and I was at that time attending Kyabje Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. So I was helping Kyabje Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche to get to his the upstairs to see His Holiness 16 Gyalwa Karmapa. And 16 Gyalwa Karmapa was waiting in the doorway, and then Rinpoche came in and made an offering of a scarf, and I was helping him. And then all of a sudden he looked at me and he pointed to me and said, "Who's this?" I was very nervous, And then Khyentse Rinpoche said, he's the youngest son of Neten Choling, who passed away, and he's the one I talked to you about, and you decided to give him the recognition. And then, he said, okay. And then he looked at me very kind of fiercely, and he said, yeah, maybe he might be a benefit. And that was that. And then I started the Khyentse Rinpoche in Karmapa's, His Holiness 16 Gyalwa Karmapa's kind of a living room, and they were talking. And I went to set up Kyabje Rinpoche's personal quota that was arranged to bring his things there. Then at some point, one monk was coming up very fast, and then, said, Gyalwa Karmapa wants you to come right now down. So I thought I was in some big trouble or something. So then I ran down, and then His Holiness was waiting for me because they all been served lunch, and he wanted me to join the lunch. So that I thought was very, very kind. I think so. I was there, and in that time, I think Siddhu Rinpoche was there. No, not there at that time. Shama Rinpoche was there, and Kongtrul was there, and Tale Changu Rinpoche was there. Chumpanur Rinpoche was there. Many teachers who are eminent, great teachers now, are there then. And I remember Kongtrul Rinpoche after lunch coming into the living room, and I hear that he was feeling a little bit not well, but he looked quite well to me. But anyway, that's what I heard. And he came, and Karmapa was sitting and talking with His Holiness Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, and there were some other lamas. And then Kongtrul Rinpoche came and sat next to him and put his head on his Holiness Gyalwa Karmapa's lap, and then His Holiness was patting him, on his head. And there was so much of love that is just unbelievable, in both of them. His Holiness to Kongtrul Rinpoche, and then Rinpoche to His Holiness, a lot of love and a lot of devotion. So that was really a wonderful and heartwarming experience. And then my father's reincarnation was enthroned in Rumtik at a small throne, and Shama Rinpoche did the Punso Ngading, the 5 auspicious kind of speeches. And then His Holiness gave his scarves and so forth, gifts and so forth. And as a tradition, all of the family members go afterwards to present a scarf to His Holiness Gyalwa Karmapa as expressing our gratitude and thank him for recognizing our father's reincarnation and being enthroned in such a significant monastery as a Rumtik monastery, and arranging it all. So my brother went, and then he asked me to go, so I went to offer a scarf. And this is not a presumptuous, I hope, but something that I hold dear in my heart as I kind of offered the scarf. He's always looked at me very kind of intently. And then he gave me back my scarf, and then he gave me another scarf, and another scarf, 3 scarves. And he said, well, we don't have the time to enthrone you this time, but we'll do a big enthronement for you, okay? And then he also paused for a little bit, and then he said, well, however, don't forget to serve the Dharma. don't forget to serve the Dharma, and don't forget to be a benefit to beings, and have a meaningful life. And that stayed with me. And always remember that. Those are his words to me. So then that, and later then that evening, Kyabje Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche told me, what did His Holiness told you? He told you something. And then I repeated what he told me. He said, just keep them in your heart. Well, anyway, when you talk about the teachers, it's always quite difficult, because you think about their kindness, and you think about their grace, and you think about how that has kind of impacted you and shaped your whole life and destiny. So sorry about this, but anyway, that was that. Then afterwards, then His Holiness left. Khyentse Rinpoche left for Bhutan, and I was in Sikkim for a little while. And then there was big Sabding Purpa, one of the Choling Tersas, Vajakalaya practice that is done in Rumtik, and there's a big Lama dance that takes place in Rumtik. So that was going to be happening, and Dzongtso Khyentse Rinpoche was going to go, and he graciously invited me to come with him and to Rumtik to see His Holiness, and as well as also observe the Lama dance. So we went, and this is, really how he was. Lama dance and all of those are very great, wonderful. And then I think because of such a, it's such a big event, and it's such a occasion of kind of doing a big Lama dance for public to view. They have invited governors of Sikkim that time, and then they have also invited the king of Sikkim that time. So king of the Sikkim has come, governor has come, so many other dignitaries have come, and then also some of the royal family from Bhutan has also come. There were so many dignitaries, and there are so many lamas, also great important lamas on the roof. 16th Gyalwa Karmapa kind of gave a dinner and a party, I guess. And so I was invited there too. So I was watching from the kind of corner, and His Holiness 16th Gyalwa Karmapa was wearing a yellow Zen, and he was socializing. And really, it looked like among man there's a sun, kind of moving. It had that kind of a glory, that kind of a ziji, There was a lot of dignitaries. There was a king and there was governor. Everyone else looked so kind of like, ordinary. And then His Holiness Gyalwa Karmapa was like a sun moving among the humans to sort of like radiate. And he had such a infectious laugh, bellyful laugh. He was laughing, ha 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 ha. And then the whole sort of the corridor was kind of echoing, whether his laughter, joyous laughter. I thought this is not this is not a human. This is like a enlightened being, sun like enlightened being to illuminate the darkness of the world. I had a really deep kind of a feeling of that, and deep kind of a great sort of experience of being touched by his presence in that way. Now then, to talk, those are kind of the little bit of my personal experience, but then as to kind of really speak about His Holiness, inner quality, and much of a great inner quality is going to be very difficult to fathom by anybody. I think even a bodhisattva in Bhumi could not fathom and describe, so who am I to kind of fathom and describe? But however, all of the enlightened qualities as what we hear and what we read in the teachings are, in the Mahayana Uttatantra Shastra, there is the enlightened chapter, and enlightened qualities chapter. It all really seems to be present in His Holiness 16 Gyalwa Karmapa, the freedom of the qualities of the freedom, or qualities of the maturation, Talde and Pinde, But all of those, essentially what it comes down to is, Khyentse Nusum. Chenpa is like a knowledge, and then Dzeva is love, and Nupa is the transformative kind of a power or quality. Now, in a kind of a simple form, if we have to speak about like things that I have heard. These are previous ones, is what I have observed, but this is what I have heard. Once I heard this very, very wonderful, quality of His Holiness 16 Gyalwa Karmapa from my own root teacher. As in the evening, sometimes he would tell stories of different teachers. So my own root teacher, received a Kaju Hanzu, Damganzu from His Holiness Lord Rinpoche, really considered him as one of his root teachers, and as well as, really always had the deep devotion as none other than kind of, Buddha. Karmapa. So whenever he tells the story, he tells with such a reverence and a deep kind of a wonderment. So once he was telling us this story, this story was told to my root teacher, Dzigar Khyentse Rinpoche, by a man named Jamkang Gwenam. Jamkang Gwenam is one of the kind of ministers of Dege. Then later, I think he became a personal private secretary of His Holiness 16 Gyalwa Karmapa. So once they were sitting on the roof of Rumtek, they were sitting together, and His Holiness was dictating something to Jamkang Gwenam. Jamkang Gwenam was writing something down. And then His Holiness went into sort of like a deep kind of a trance for a little while. And then, in the end of the trance, he started to burst out laughing. And the Jamkang Gwenam, because he was very close to His Holiness, he said, what happened? And he said, one Nepalese young boy was trying to cross a river in the, down in the valley. Rumtik is up in the mountain, and then there's a gorge, and there's a big river. Trying to cross a river, and then he was being taken by the river, current. And then he was calling for His Holiness, because he's seen a lot of the Tibetans, older man or woman, or many Tibetans do, Karmapa chino, Karmapa chino, Karmapa chino. So he was also saying, Karmapa chino, Karmapa chino, Karmapa chino, as he was being kind of in danger to be drowned and carried by the current of the river. So His Holiness saw that. So he was concentrating on getting him in the safe shore. So then he got in the safe shore, and then Jamka Gurnam said, what was the laughter? And then after he got to the other side, he got a little conflicted because he's a Hindu boy. So then he was saying, no, I don't take a refuge in Karmapa. Now that he's in the safe, he kind of felt a little guilt that he was, being a Hindu, calling for Karmapa's help. So I think he felt a little bit funny. So he said, no, I don't take a Karmapa's refuge in the Karmapa. So then that made him laugh. So someone with that kind of ability of transparency of 3 times and all directions, as instantly someone calling for your help, to be able to see that, without any sort of obstructions and hindrances, who could that be other than an enlightened being, And this is a description of knowing the phenomena world as a marble in the palm of your hand, which only enlightened being can have. And that comes from the realization of the nature and the perfection of the nature itself, So that story always stayed with me. And when His Holiness Khyentse Rinpoche was telling me, he was telling me as an quality of an enlightened being, a living enlightened being, And then another story. This story I haven't heard from Khyentse Rinpoche himself, but I heard from my brother, who Khyentse Rinpoche has told him. And Rinpoche had 2 daughters, and then the younger one passed away in Chandigarh. Then later, Khyentse Rinpoche have met up with His Holiness, and as it's a tradition, you make an offering to great lamas to do prayers on behalf of the deceased. So Khyentse Rinpoche did that with His Holiness, and I think Rinpoche was a little bit, saddened that his younger daughter, who in a very sort of a young age passed away. So I think His Holiness 16th Gyalwa Karmapa kind of knew that Khyentse Rinpoche was a little bit saddened by losing of his young daughter in such a young age. And so wanted to kind of give a little bit of consult him. So said to him that, she's, well taken care of, and that he should not be worried. And then, by the way, whoever makes a, connection to him after somebody pass away, and makes a request to pray on behalf, he sees them once for sure come around him, and then he's able to help and be a benefit to guide them in a better place and a better realm and much better rebirth. So to be able to see, not just of in this world with the transparent see, with the sort of Sangye, non-defiled clairvoyance, but to be able to see the other world, the world of intermediate, world of other realms and fields, and guide them, guide beings to better place and better realm and better rebirth, and ultimately to a sort of pure rum, who could actually do that, other than the enlightened ones, like Karmapa or, so I think this is sort of in the kind of a reference to the Chempa, the wisdom of knowing suchness and wisdom of knowing the phenomena world, whether it's the kind of immediate or the far hidden phenomena as in a marble in the palm of one's hand, without any sort of obstructions. I think only few teachers and just few examples could be there, and that is, I think, in my lifetime, is His Holiness Gyalwa Karmapa. So that's that, and then now as far as the kind of Zewa is concerned, the love is concerned, I think because of his love for the Dharma, because of his love for the beings, and because of his love for everyone who's connected to him, I think the Nyingma and the Kagyu and all of the kind of prosperity that we see now is really here, especially, for example, after that whole tragedy that took place in Tibet, the Dharma was sort of like a really, in the ember stage. In the tradition of Dharma and the tradition of monastery, tradition of Tibetan culture, and tradition of continuation of any kind of survival was in the sort of ember stage, very, very weak. That whole from the stage of ember to be reignited to what we have now in the place, comes from, I think, His Holiness, love for the Dharma, love for the beings, and love for the tradition, a love for the, future of Dharma in the world. Like, for example, His Holiness encourage all of the great masters of all traditions to really establish monasteries, re-establish the traditions, and gather whatever the means you could to sort of have a Sangha, a monastic Sangha, and revive that whole of the Buddha Dharma in that way. And many did, like Kongtrul Rinpoche, Parinirvana Rinpoche, so many others, and then himself doing it so, and that comes from not in a sort of like any kind of attachment, but from a sense of a real deep kind of a, love of Dharma that is the greatest means to serve the benefit of beings. So therefore, love of beings. There's a story, how much he cares for people who are connected to him. From Bir, we have one man named Rashikando. Rashikando's son is Abu Riri. Abu Riri was a monk in Rumtik. And at some point, he came back, and then he didn't return to Rumtik. And His Holiness Gyalwa Karmapa, as we know, is the King of Kings, teacher of teachers. Still sent 3 personal letters to Bir to inviting him to come back and rejoin the monastery. Who would go for such a kind of like trouble, especially a significant, great man or woman of an ordinary mindset, if it's not like a, somewhat way beyond ordinary and extraordinary, as someone who really doesn't matter whether you are actually low or whether you are high or whether you are intermediate, whoever it is, whom you have a connection, you care for them, and you have such a kind of like expression of care to send a personal 3 letters to invite him back and join back the monastery and not waste his life in beer. Now, if His Holiness Karmapa can do something like that for Aburiri, who does not know anything much, who's not really good at anything, like another, he's good at, any of the rituals, or no, he's good in the dance, or no, he's good in the chanting, or no, he's good in a kind of a, pecha, or no, in good of realization. He's only known to be a good tea server, But still, he shows that much of a love and care, So that really kind of touched me and exemplified his love. If he could have so much of a love and care to invite him back and send a personal letter 3 times, how much he would have for all of the others. And I'm sure everyone can verify that from their own kind of experience, from their own relation to him, So then the last is the Nupa. The Nupa is the kind of transformative qualities. Transformative quality is, from the amber, what we have after the 1959, the status of the Dharma being so weak, so almost to be annihilation with the kind of upheaval and the tragedy that took place in Tibet, and everyone being exiled and they're kind of lost, to what we have, in the world, the Buddha Dharma, from the Tibetan tradition of a Buddha Dharma, to survive, not to only survive, but flourish, and to have all these great masters, all these great benefactor of beings, and all these traditions being preserved, and preserved not only just for the sake of preserve, but it's actively serving for the benefit of beings. And thousands of people are coming in a contact with the Tibetan Buddhism of strain of Buddhism, and being touched and valued and appreciated deeply for its profound wisdom and means to not only just help individuals in this life, but individuals to be having some kind of a direction to approach their end of life and intermediate, and then also to have a better rebirth, and then also ultimately to have a hope of attaining enlightenment. Of course, there are many great masters who've been working in that field, but none more influential, none more greater, who took a deep care and concern for its survival, to rejuvenate its vitality, and to promote, to get to the place where it is now, then His Holiness 16 Gyalwa Karmapa. And we all, therefore, whoever is from any tradition, any tradition, whether it is from the Common Kagyu tradition, or whether it is from the general Kagyu traditions, or whether it is from the Nyingma or the Sakya or any other, really owe it to his great power to sort of, revival of the Dharma in the world from stage of Amba. So I would like to conclude there with this three things being what I consider as a sort of a living Buddha's, Sangye Karmapa's sort of like qualities, and the what those qualities has sort of brought us to a global effect. Thank you very much.